down the hammer and pick up the pencil. You're about to listen to the Savvy Radio Show. Learn from real-life real estate investors, experience revealed with the Savvy Landlord as your host.
So how I met Scott England, which was awkward for me because people just randomly email me or text me and say, hey, I want to do lunch with you. I'm like, okay, why would I want to do lunch with this guy? No offense if you've ever emailed me or texted me. I'm just like, because my first inclination, what's the motive, right? Like people, why are they, what are they doing? And so he sent a message. I don't even know if we're Facebook friends because everybody has 1,000 Facebook friends and they don't know him. So he's like, let's meet at Panera Bread. I meet at Panera Bread and I was blown away. His history in the banking industry. It was so cool what he used to do. I don't know the term, but you buy mortgages for like you're working for a bank, you're going to other banks and you're gobbling up their little portfolios, right, and then you're holding them at this bank. It's like a sales job. How cool is that? Unlimited funds buying mortgages. And so he Google it up. What's that company he used to work for? That went under, the whole subprime debacle.
TBW.
Yeah. Have you ever watched that movie? Have you ever seen the movie 99 Homes? You need to watch that movie 99 Homes, or the collapse of the whole meltdown. So he was involved in that. His company was, but he was here and traveled, and so I just got to really know him. And then I interviewed him on the radio show, and he's the most downloaded person I've ever interviewed thus far. Even my friend does asset protection, lives in some small country somewhere because it's like the best place to live, and like he knows everybody around the world. You outran him. So I was like, man, I want to bring some knowledge to this group, and these are men and women that want to grow personally as a business. And so Scott and I, we became fast friends. We've been hanging out, and every time we get together, it's like successful businessmen growing their business together. This is working for me. This is not working for him. So then I interviewed him, and then I asked him, can you do a deal for me? Because every Friday I try to do a deal on the show. And this deal that he threw out was about being humbled. Like, that's not a deal. And it was interesting. And then he's just a real estate investor doing it all day long. And so I was like, hey man, can you speak at this deal for me? I want to bring super knowledge. And he just blew me away with the college education, SWOT analysis. And I was like, how in the world is this guy gonna take SWOT analysis to real estate? Is that true?
Yes.
You sure?
100%.
Okay.
I'm positive.
So please welcome my friend, Scott England.
Thanks, Stephen. Well, I appreciate that introduction. And before we get into what the SWOT analysis is, the W in there stands for weaknesses, and that's why this is important for me, because when you've got a long list of weaknesses and just a few strengths there, you gotta really identify what these are and focus on those and maximize the impact of those. Stephen gave you a little bit of my background, but a little about me. My name is Scott England. I live here in Oklahoma City, 4 children, married. Just moved into a house that we acquired at an auction. Got a little bit of acreage. Been working on a compost pile for a while, about 3 months, and just realized I put it too close to the creek bed. So that's gone. I spent the better part of a decade in the banking industry, specifically correspondent mortgage lending. So as Stephen mentioned, that's essentially, I worked for a bank that bought mortgage notes from other banks. And they are a little bit different, well, I would say significantly different than what the mortgage notes that we encounter on a day-to-day basis, in that they are what's called A paper. So it's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, Ginnie Mae notes. So that's as where we would trade if we got into that side of the business, in maybe private notes, off-market notes. The banks trade in the sort of that higher tier, lower margin note. So I did that, traveled significantly around the country, developing those relationships. It was a heavy sales job, and started in real estate on accident. About 10 years ago, couldn't sell our first home, turned it into a rental, And ipso facto, I was a real estate investor, and made a lot of mistakes in that time. Still make mistakes, and this is something that I originally encountered in college and thought it was stupid.
So did I.
Yeah. Until I had to break it out to fix a mistake that I made. So let's just kind of get right into it. So what's important about the SWOT analysis is not necessarily the analysis itself, but what it's providing for us. So it's a way for us to plan for our goals in a strategic way, right? It breaks everything down for us in a simple manner, and lets us look at it from a top-down view to create that plan. So SWOT analysis, the SWOT, it stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, right? That's the basics, right? And so what this is, it's a way of analyzing the internal and external factors that are involved in the business decisions that we make, right? So like everything, there are positives and negatives about this particular exercise. And I'd like to point out the biggest one first, the biggest downside of this is it's very subjective, right? Because you're the one identifying your own strengths and weaknesses, or your business's strengths and weaknesses. And so high probability you are going to be either biased or unaware of the possibilities that fall into these categories. So, but on the same kind of token there, what makes it subjective also makes it versatile. So we can use this exercise for almost any decision we make, right? Whether that be, should I get into real estate investing and buy my first rental property, right? I mean, that's probably the most important decision as investors we have made or will make is, am I going to get into this thing? Am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? All the way to, I've got dozens of rental properties. Do I expand or do I divest, right? Anything and everything in between can be analyzed using this method, and it's easy and it's simple, yet it's effective. So why do we need to use the SWOT analysis, right? Well, there's a lot of answers to that question, but specifically for us, and I think specifically what's important to the types of decisions that we make as investors, is that allows us to sort of circumvent some of these fallacies that we run into or we encounter as investors, right? So these are a few that I've run into, and I'm sure you all have either had these same thoughts yourselves or run into or talk to other investors who kind of have this mentality. But without an analysis of our plan, we have our objective or our goal, and then we somehow just fall into a plan, right? So a couple of examples. I need capital. I'm a new investor. I don't have money, right? This is one I see all the time, right? Either when I'm speaking to other investors that may be new or just kind of are at that pivot point we all get to where you just don't know what to do next. And I actually see this on certain like real estate forum posts all the time. I'm new, I don't have money, I need capital, so I'm just going to do wholesale. I'm just going to be a wholesaler. That's me. That's what I am.
You get burned out.
As if wholesaling is the magic answer to capital. In my opinion, it's one of the harder ways to, it's a great way to make money. It's an extremely difficult way to build capital. So, number two, I want to fix and flip a house and either rent it or sell it, right? Ipso facto, I'm a contractor, right? Now, I renovate houses now.
This is awesome. It's so true. All these are just...
Right,
that's how we think.
They did one, right? And I put those little arrows there. I don't know if anybody ever took philosophy classes, but that's sort of, the therefore sign, right? That's the magic fade, right? There should be something there, but there's not, right? So, and this is me here. This is this guy, right? I need high-level reporting I was in finance for 10 years, therefore I know everything I need to know about bookkeeping and accounting and strategic planning as it regards to your own reporting.
And that's how you were trained, and that's why your mind thinks that way, because you had to give reports.
That's right.
To your
saw financial reports all the time. For 10 years, growth in the financial sector was all I talked about.
Spreadsheets.
Right. Saw the reports all the time. But I'm not an accountant. I'm not a bookkeeper, and I'm actually terrible at nearly everything involved in producing quality financial reporting. This was me end of 2015, right? Well, up to that point. End of 2015, right around the start of 2016, somebody who was a lot smarter than me said, "You're an idiot, stop doing that." And for me at least, the reason why taking a little bit of time to do an analysis like this is I'm still paying for that. Maybe not financially, but my business went through a period of time where it wasn't growing. And in fact, it had to contract to catch up for my mistake. And then slowly built back up to the momentum it had prior to, right? So I'm still paying for that mistake that I made a year and a half ago. And it could have easily been avoided. So
basically doing something that you could have outsourced, but all your energy was focused on that.
That's right.
Which held you back.
And it, yeah, right. So I had in my mind, I know finance. I was in finance for a decade. This is something that I should do, right? Accounting and finance is its own bubble. Therefore, I should do my own accounting.
Right on. Okay.
And could have easily outsourced that. So here's the process. Straightforward. You figure out what your strategic objective is, right? This isn't your goal or what you want to do, and there's some work involved in getting to that point, right? Again, you got to keep in mind that this analysis can be very subjective, and you have to work to not put your own biases on top of it. But a strategic objective is, I would say, different than a goal, because a goal is just something that's fluffy. Now, they're important, and that's something separate. But goals are nice and sparkly and shiny and fluffy. Strategic objectives are not. They're dull and boring and not sexy. But they're important when it comes down to analyzing what you're going to do, what actionable steps you're going to take to achieve that fluffy goal, right? Identify that objective, identify your SWOTs. What are my, and I'm going to say my, but it's not necessarily you personally. It could be, what are the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a decision, right? And we're going to go into a real world example in a minute. But you identify as best you can, without bias, what your strengths, your weaknesses, and the opportunities and threats are of the decision or whatever scenario that you find yourself in. Third step is analyze that information, right? And that's kind of that's the meat of it, right? What do you do with it? I'm unorganized, and I have a tendency to, what should I say? I have a tendency to not completely follow through with tasks, right? That's a weakness of mine, right? If I would have done this 2 years ago, I would have identified that. And then during my analysis, I would have said, keeping books, which requires you to be very detail-oriented and finish the complete task, because it's either 0% or 100%, right? That's a threat, right? That's not something that I can do or should do, and not keeping the books in a professional way is a threat, right? So I ran into that problem. So you analyze this information, and then you create from that analysis what your tactical plan is going to be, right? What are the steps you're going to take that's actionable steps? You're going to digest that that information in the analysis and come out with a clearly defined set of plans that you can follow to get to that strategic objective, right? Right, because it's not, because as we saw a couple of slides ago when there's the fallacies, right? This is what I want.
This is what I assume.
Magic happens. This is what I'm going to do, right? If there's a plan, and I think real estate investors, more than anybody for some reason, and I'm including myself in this, we have a tendency to just go out and do stuff, which is great. It's a great quality in real estate investors. We just get in there and we just start figuring it out. We get our hands dirty. We get up early and we go to work. But a lot of times it's that, we're a hamster on a wheel, right? So this helps us to focus that. All right, so there's a real world example. If you're anything like me, when you look at something like this that's in chart form that looks like some professor made up, starts getting a little boring, right? And you start thinking in your mind, yeah, that's great when you're putting it into chart form, right? But we're going to run through a real world example from a colleague and friend and client of mine. So it's a SWOT analysis of Tyler Weinrich of W Properties. He's a good guy. He's a local real estate investor. And to this point, he's been developing his own wholesale process, right? He's been very successful in the time that he's been at it full time. So he went full time in 2015. He developed a successful wholesale system, and now he wants to expand his business. Right? So we're going to run through the SWOT analysis of Tyler's decision to expand his business, right? Or he just wants to do more. I wouldn't even say expand his business at this point, because he just wants to get more involved. He wants to do more, right? He's wholesaled, done a lot of good deals, made a lot of great contacts. Now what?
So more volume.
More volume? Could be, right? Definitely.
Would that
But
be
how does he? Right. So how do we know more volume is the way to go?
Don't you need a specific number? Like I want to make $20,000 a month, or
That's your goal,
okay.
right?
So we're talking about an objective.
This is the objective, right?
Just
If the goal is to
expand.
make If the goal is to make $20,000 a month, right?
But in this issue, he just wants to expand. What does that mean? There's no
Maybe
gauge.
wholesale less and start rehabbing or.
This is where the analysis comes in.
Okay.
Thank you for asking those questions.
Hey,
I
I get
appreciate
paid the big
that.
bucks.
Right. This is where we all want to expand, right? We all want to get more. I mean, none of us are in here because it's like, you know what, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell anything. I don't want to buy anything. I don't want to flip anything. I don't want to rehab anything. I'm good. I'm just going to stay doing exactly what I'm doing, right? So we're going to analyze the decision to do more, right? So first we have to define what the strategic objective is. Now, it doesn't have to be grand, but it has to be clear, right? What does Tyler want to do? He wants to expand his business. I want to expand my business. Great. Right? He doesn't want to shrink his business. He doesn't want to sell. He doesn't want to necessarily raise capital, right? He wants to expand his business. He wants to do more in real estate, right? So let's look at how we run through that analysis. We've got our strategic objective, expand the business. It's a clear objective that we can point to, right? So first we have to identify the SWOTs. As I said before, this is a point where we have to be honest with ourselves, right? You may not have the strengths you think you have, or at least not in relation to your strategic objective. And it's important to list the items that the way they are, not the way you want them to be, right? There's a lot of things that I want to be good at that I'm not, and vice versa. There's some things that I don't care that I'm good at, but I am, right? Most importantly, they have to be relevant to your objective, right? So let's run through Tyler's. So Tyler's opportunities, we're going to start there, right? So let's stop for a minute. The SWOTs are strengths, weaknesses, right? Those are your internal factors, right? That's what I'm good at. That's what my business is good at. Internally, this is what we're working with. The opportunities and threats are what's out in the world, right? What am I going to run into?
Competition.
Competition is one. That's right. That's right. So Tyler's going to list his opportunities. All right, I want to expand. What's my expansion opportunities? I'm going to look at my business. I'm going to list out the 5 most probable expansion opportunities for me at this point. Number 1, MLS listing referrals. He's got his license. He's an agent. He runs into them all the time. I mean, he can just list them, right? He runs into these sellers who may not fit his system or may not want to sell via that process. He can put them right onto the market, get his commissions, right? Second one, build a real estate portfolio. He's been wholesaling. He's been doing well. He's been successful, but he doesn't own any real estate. Another possibility, another opportunity is acquiring another wholesale shop, right? Or some other form of inorganic growth, right? He goes in, maybe he partners with another wholesaler that's successful. They pool their resources and they build their own internal efficiencies, right? They're able to leverage the same resources and the same processes to maximize those efficiencies, and that's kind of why businesses acquire or merge all the time. He can go into a new wholesale market. Right now, it's just Oklahoma City. There's a lot of opportunities. I mean, any city or any township in the state he can go into, right? Finally, he has the opportunity to grow his brand within the market and gain a larger market share, right? So what we're going to do, we're going to use these 5, and there's no number, there's no specific way to go about this. We're going to use 2. We're going to pick the most relevant 2 items of each of these, right? So we're going to pick build a real estate portfolio and expand to a new wholesale market. So we're going to take those, we're going to circle them, and then we're going to move on to our other, move these off here, and we're going to move on.
I have a question. When you said brand, market percentage,
right?
How do you determine who has what percentage of that?
Well, I think it's good for his business, and part of the reason why that's probably not a great opportunity to look at right now is there's no data on that. We don't know
who's the king, who's the queen.
Right. There's you could a lot of us could probably list what we believe the top 5 wholesale shops in the city are.
Sure.
And maybe we can do some sort of survey and we can ask them how many deals they did, how many deals they looked at, that kind of thing, and get that information, but they're probably not going to give it to us.
Sure.
And so it's difficult to know what your market share is and what the potential market share is, which in some sort of organic growth scenario where you're gaining market share, you got to know exactly what market share, where you're starting from, where you're going. So that's a good opportunity, but it's going to be difficult to get it done. So if we look at Tyler's threats, right? What are the threats to his business as is, and his threat to his future business going into an expansion plan, right? Number 1 is diluting his resources. Certain amount of capital, certain amount of time, right? As we all know, it's really easy to lose both of those. So the dilution of resources is a threat to his current business and clearly to anything that he expands into. System failure. He's developed a good system now. What happens if he expands or grows in a way and it doesn't work? It's not scalable, or it has to be changed in a way that sort of undermines the efficiency of the whole platform and it collapses, right? Competition, right? Whether it's going into a new market, whether it's expanding, building a real estate portfolio, competing with other buy and hold investors or flip investors, right? There's always going to be competition, and it's important to know what your competition is. Otherwise, you could be running into a brick wall. Disruption of marketing channels, right? So, for me, not being in the business, this is a little difficult for me to really grasp onto conceptually. But within Tyler's existing process, he has various online and offline marketing channels that he taps into. And disrupting those, right? Disrupting those marketing channels, those lead systems, or those lead generation avenues can clearly have an adverse effect on overall business. And then, of course, barrier tax.
And you're meaning like if they change their algorithm, like he's paying a service to provide leads, and that service changes their fee structure, or they can't no longer have access to this database that you're mining from,
Right.
could disrupt this whole business. Is what you're saying.
Right, or he has to make some sort of change to those channels for whatever expansion plans he has. Right, like I said, this for me it's a little difficult conceptually to
Maybe a city puts a ban on bandit signs, and that was a good source of leads.
That's right. That's right. Actually, that's a really good example. It's a really good example, right? What if he goes into a new market? What if bandit signs is his system? He goes into a new market, spends all this time and energy and
money.
maybe some money, and he puts bandit signs everywhere. And hey, guess what? The city won't allow you to do that.
Right.
Well, crap, right? It's a great example. Thank you. So those are the external factors. All right, what are my opportunities? I want to expand my business. What's out there? I'm going to list 5. I'm going to list the top 5. I'm going to pick 1 or 2.
What is bear attack?
Oh, I just make sure everybody's
bear
awake.
attack?
Like a real, well, yeah. Don't go into market. Don't go into. That's right. Do not expand into markets where there is a high, heavy bear activity.
Colorado,
Yeah, that's right. Not rural Colorado is a terrible place.
East Side, Oklahoma City.
All right, so now we're going to look at the internal factors. All right, we figured out what our options are to expand, our opportunities, what can go wrong, now our strengths. All right, Tyler's got a proven wholesale system. It's worked.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of local market knowledge that he has gained in his time as a full-time wholesaler, and that's an asset. Before he went full-time in real estate, he was in the IT field, so he's got an IT background, which obviously helps for online marketing. He's got corporate marketing experience, which also has been an asset to him up to that point, for obvious reasons. And he's well regarded amongst his peers, right? If anybody, if you're like me and you have spent a lot of time networking and built part of your career on that, you understand how important that is, to have the respect of your peers. So these are his strengths. We're going to pick 2, right? He's proven wholesale system. Boom. Check mark. We're going to circle that one. And then we're going to pick the final. He's well regarded amongst his peers, right? We're going to pick these 2 strengths and we're going to focus on those. Now let's look at his weaknesses. He's got limited capital, right? All right, that's pretty typical for us as investors. The inelasticity of the process he currently uses. It's a great system, it works, but it's rigid. There's a certain, what makes it a good system also makes it a vulnerable system. He's a single person operation. He has no history of expansion. All he's done is wholesale. He's done a great job. He's successful, but he's never expanded before. He has no framework from which to work from in that regard. And he's limited to his local market. He knows Oklahoma City, doesn't know Dallas, doesn't know Fort Smith, doesn't know Tulsa, doesn't know Bartlesville.
Those weaknesses, did he define those, or did someone help him define those? Because those are good weaknesses. Not good weaknesses, but those are very well researched.
Yeah, Tyler and I worked together on this, yeah.
So you helped him extrapolate that from him, or just knowledge?
Right, and especially for this one, you probably want to go to a trusted colleague and say, listen, I need you to
help me.
tell me what you see, and don't worry about my feelings, right? Tell me what you see.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Yeah.
About how much time did that process specifically? How much time did you guys take on that?
I don't know exactly, but you can get it done. I mean, assuming you don't have a lot of kind of like barriers like mental barriers or bias barriers to get through, you can get this done in a couple of days. It got, with he and I emailing back and forth, we took care of it in probably 48, 72 hours. We identified what those were. All of them. All right. So now we have the third step of the process, running the analysis. We've got all of our data, our information, right? Well, now what do we do? There's two questions we have to ask. How can I utilize my strengths and mitigate my weaknesses to capitalize on the opportunities? Right? How do I use what I'm good at to help me realize this opportunity? How do I take what I'm not good at, I take my weaknesses, what kind of wall can I build to mitigate the impact that those weaknesses have on that ultimate strategic objective, right? So it's kind of the reverse. Second question is, how can I utilize my strengths, mitigate my weaknesses to nullify my threats, right? I'm moving in this direction, I know what I want to do, I see this opportunity, I'm using my strengths, I'm mitigating my weaknesses to achieve this or to realize the opportunity that I've identified. How do I make sure that I'm covering my back so that I don't run into a catastrophic error, right? Yes?
When you talk about like nullify my threats, I mean, I think of threats as like temporary too, because I think you're nullifying for a certain season, then after that you just attack it.
Right, and that's a good point. This is not a one and done type of thing.
Gotcha.
This is something that you can do for multiple business decisions. Obviously, this is a pretty big example.
Right.
It's expanding the business, right? But it can be for anything. I mean, any decision you make, at least for us within the context of business, right? Like one thing I want to do is I want to run the analysis selling a portion of the portfolio right now, right? I mean, there's a lot of anecdotal talk. We were talking about it this morning, right?
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be a good idea for me and you to make a sell decision based off that kind of just spitballing, right?
That's right.
We need to sit down and we need to analyze it, right?
And the reasons why.
Right. So it's a good point. It can be seasonal. And quite frankly, 6 months from now, Tyler probably needs to do it again. Because there's going to be decisions to make in 6 months. So how do I nullify my threats that I've identified so that nothing bad happens, right? I don't hit unforeseen complications in the expansion. All right. So this is where you're going to need to bear with me. This is where the analysis happens, right? This is where it's dull and dry and boring. And nobody in this room probably gets distracted more than me when it comes to this kind of thing. But when you live through a mistake that could have been avoided, changes the way you approach this kind of thing.
It's your motivation, drives your motivation.
That's right. Never make that mistake again. So this is how the analysis happens, right? So we take one of our opportunities. I want to build a real estate portfolio. Boom. Tyler has decided I want to start building my portfolio. All right, how? Well, I'm going to take my strength. I'm going to use this one strength. I'm going to figure out how I use the fact that I have a proven wholesale system to build a real estate portfolio. All right? You ask that question, how do I use the fact that I have a proven wholesale system to build a real estate portfolio? And you come to a conclusion on that analysis. Well, I'm going to use the system to acquire properties. Right? This is an obvious one. Easy. Well, I'm going to use that system, and instead of wholesaling a portion of them, I'm just going to keep them. Right? So what's the plan, though? That's great. Okay, I'm going to keep them. Now what? How are you going to get funding? Well, what are you going to do? Do they need renovation? Do you need a mortgage? Do you need a property manager? Do you need, all the questions that we run into. So if we have a tactical plan, create a profile of the properties that he wants, and then retain a certain amount of those wholesale deals. So his plan right now that he knows, all right, now I got to create a profile. It's not just random houses. I have to create a profile of what is going to be good for me. Right? So here's the real world result. This is the actual result of this particular part of the analysis. Tyler got 3 rentals and 1 flip in less than 6 months from having none. All right, second piece. Same opportunity, how do I build a real estate portfolio? But in this, how do I use the fact that I'm well regarded amongst my peers to help me build a real estate portfolio? Right? So you think that through. Tyler has to think this through, probably with the help of a colleague if you've never done this exercise before. What do I do? All right, well, I need to assemble a competent team. I'm going to need a team, right? So what's my plan? I need to hire a project manager, hire a property manager, hire an accountant, right? I know people. I know smart people. They're my friends. They're my trusted colleagues. You know, I see them at meetings like this. There's a lot of brain power to leverage in a network like that. And this is, I mean, obviously, you know, this is why you're here, right? Real world example. So he's been acquiring, renovating, managing rentals, and doing bookkeeping without changing his day-to-day operations. He hasn't changed, I don't want to say nothing.
So he leveraged those 3 major things.
Right. So he ran the analysis and said, okay, I need to assemble a team. He assembled that team through his plan. Now, obviously, these examples are pretty straightforward and obvious, and that's why they're first, right? Easy enough. All right, moving on. Boom. New opportunity. Expanded a new wholesale market. Who wants to do that? I don't want to just build a real estate portfolio. I want to expand into a new market. And this is what's actually happening. All right, so he asked himself, how do I use the fact that I have a proven wholesale system to help expand into a new wholesale market? Conclusion, I leverage the existing system. Cool. How? Right? Obviously, that's the right decision, but how? What do I do? Just finding that answer doesn't lead to a plan. So you have to develop a tactical plan. All right? So here, I have to sit down, or Tyler had to sit down and figure out a way to use his existing system in the new market. All right? Real world result, he's got leads and deals going on in the new market. Again, you got to bear with this process, but this is the meat of it, right? Same opportunity, second strength. How do I use the fact that I'm well regarded amongst how does Tyler use the fact that he's well regarded amongst his peers to expand into a new wholesale market? Well, he leverages that peer network, obviously, right? So I'm going to leverage that network. I'm going to go ask all my friends and colleagues, hey, I want to go into a new market. Where do I go? What do you guys know? What's good? Did you guys grow up in Bartlesville? Anybody know anything about Dallas? Right? Anybody grow up in Tulsa? And do you know people there? Do you trust people there? Right? So his plan, use a network to build a support system in the new market. All right? Real world result. He's got the infrastructure for lead follow-up, capital, and renovations done in his new market. He hasn't gone to this new market yet, right? He's leveraged his network to build a trusted support system. All right, our weaknesses. We got to ask ourselves, all right, how do I make sure that the fact that Tyler has no history of expansion, he has not expanded before, he's not grown his business, he's launched his business, and that's it, right? He's done more deals. That's the extent of his expansion, is launching to the amount of deals that he originally set out to do. That's it. So he has no history of expansion. How does he keep that from affecting his expansion plans? So he comes to the conclusion, well, I don't need to deviate from that system, right? I got a system that works. Don't change it. Don't change it, right? So what's the plan? Only acquire property using a current system. Okay, easy enough. Real world result. He doesn't go to auctions. He doesn't buy off the MLS. He doesn't try to reinvent something that he doesn't need to reinvent. He goes with what he knows, and it works so he doesn't change it. All right, moving on. Second weakness, he's a single person operation. How does he keep that from affecting his expansion plans to build a real estate portfolio? Conclusion, one person cannot effectively do multiple jobs. How many of us know that for a fact? All right, tactical plan. Well, I'm going to outsource everything that doesn't involve, or Tyler outsources everything that doesn't involve his proven system. He does this, and it works, and he's not going to move to some other line that's outside of that system. Real world result, he outsources renovation, management, and accounting. And I know him, and he outsources well. He doesn't even, he leveraged that network for people he trusts, and he doesn't spend too much time managing those people. All right. How does he keep his weakness of no history of expansion from affecting the fact that he wants to expand to a new market? All right. Conclusion, don't deviate from the proven system. Don't change it. Same one. Right? What's the plan though? All right. Tyler had to modify his system to support the expansion without altering his system. Right? He changed it, well, he modified it in such a way that he could apply it to the new market, but it's the exact same system. So real world result, the existing system has been bifurcated and not altered, meaning he split it into two pieces, but the pieces and the process and the overall system stay the exact same. Same system, two pieces. All right. Now, how does Tyler use the fact that he's a single person operation from affecting his expansion into a new wholesale market? Right? Same conclusion. One person can't do multiple jobs. Right? Tactical plan, he needs to add people to that operation. He can't do it, that means he's got to add people. He's got to find those people. Right? Real world result. The other part of that system that's been split is now performed by boots on the ground in the market. All right. So we made it through that. We're going to look at this next piece in chart form. So this is the way, once we get a little familiar with the process, we can just write it out in a chart and we don't have to go through that whole line. So this is the chart of how to mitigate the threats and keep the threats that you've identified from affecting your tactical plans for your expansion or for the opportunities. So real quick look here. I don't want to spend too much time on this. So threat, dilution of resources, strength, proven system. Right? What's your conclusion? How to use your proven system to avoid diluting your resources? Well, you leverage the system's efficiency, right? How does Tyler use the fact that he's well regarded amongst his peers to keep him from diluting his resources, right? Well, he leverages his peer network for trusted sources of professional services, and so on and so forth, right? Like I said, this analysis process is a little tedious and dry and boring. But it gives us exactly what we need to create that tactical plan. And this is where the meat comes in, right? You got to determine what those tactical plans are, and we sort of looked at those, but you write them down. So this is what actually happens in Tyler's scenario. To build a real estate portfolio, Tyler is doing the following. He's retaining some of the properties he acquires via his wholesale process. Boom. That's what he's doing. He's not going to the auction. He's not scouring and sifting through the MLS. That's his strength. He acquires properties. Right? He's outsourcing key functions of his new business to his project manager, his property manager, and his accountant. He's determined that, and he knows why. All right. To expand into a new market, Tyler is using a modified version of his existing wholesale system, leveraging his network to build a support infrastructure in the new market without the need to travel. That's huge. He's using a profit sharing model to reduce his overhead and expansion costs. He's not diluting his resources. Right? Because he went through this exercise, and instead of going and buying a bunch of bandit signs or buying lists, or instead of driving out to this market, spending money, he's created a system where he doesn't have to do any of that. He's not going into the market, he's not spending money in the market. But he's making money in the market, right? And he knows that because of the analysis. All right. To avoid diluting his resources, Tyler is doing the following. He's not diverting too much of his time and capital away from his core business. He's still focusing on what he does best and what has made him successful. He's not deviating from his core system, right? He didn't change his whole system because he needed to expand. Same system, modified. He's relying on the operational efficiencies of his core system, right? It's what's made him successful up to this point, and it's what will continue to make him successful. And finally, in order to understand and actively manage his competition, Tyler is avoiding unnecessary competition on the MLS, auctions, and the like by relying on his core business or acquisitions. He's leveraging his network to gather intel on the competition in the new market. That may sound like it's made up, but I can tell you that he has been able to gather a lot of information simply by relying on his network. And that information has proven to be very valuable to him. And he's allying with professionals in the new market, right? People who know the market a little better than him, so he can leverage that knowledge. All right? Any questions? I know it's a very dry topic, and it was...
I have some questions.
Yes.
So, is this something that do you do this yourself?
I have started again, yeah. Yeah.
And do you elicit someone else to help you, or do you just try to do it on your own?
Both. I mean, where I elicit help is identifying the SWOTs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Primarily the strengths and the weaknesses. Because they're going to change based on what your objective is, right?
Yeah, how do you drill down, like, we're all panty Annie, everything's great, until our bank account's zero.
Right.
And then
exactly.
What action steps do you take to define your weaknesses? I mean, you have to get real with yourself and say,
absolutely
I'm like the accounting thing we were talking about earlier. How many times, there's accountants that I know that they balance $1 million budgets to the penny. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't balance a $100 checkbook. I'm off by $10. Okay,
right.
Let's keep rolling.
Yeah,
I mean, it's $10 positive.
Right.
And if it was $10 negative, there's fees involved. I'll look into it.
Right.
But if my math is wrong, but I'm $10 a positive, and let's just put an extra zero on it. Let's say. But how do you define those weaknesses yourself? Like, how do you get internal and say, hey, I do this wrong?
You probably won't be able to identify them yourself, specifically the weaknesses, and not even because you don't want to, it's because it's very difficult to see those, right? I would suggest for realistic weaknesses, I would sit down with a mentor and say, I've defined my strategic objective. Here's what I want to do. It's not, I want to you go to your mentor or someone whose opinion you value and say, I want to make 20 grand a month. What do I do? What do you think? Right? You go and you say, I've defined my objective. Here's my goal. Here's what I need to do now to achieve that. I need you to tell me what I lack in that regard. Right? What weaknesses do I have in that regard? And if I would have went to my mentor and asked that and said, hey, here's what I want to do with my business. I'm expanding. I want to grow rapidly. What do you see? Well, you're a disorganized person, and the most important piece of bookkeeping is organization.
Sure.
Therefore, don't do it yourself.
You mentioned earlier about goals versus objectives. How do you find that line there? How do you cut those two in half, or how do you make it? Because goals to me are like ending, and objective is pursuing.
The way I look at it is a goal is where the line stops, right? Like you said, it's ending. The objective is going to be that next level underneath. Okay, well, what has to happen for that goal?
Well, like in this case, how do we know that his objective is expanding his market? Like, people ask me that question, how many more units do you want?
Right.
Right? Well, there's a specific number, because that number yields a specific lifestyle.
Right.
Okay? So it's pretty quantifiable on my side. But like when you say the word expanding a business, you're like, what the F does that mean? 5 markets, 3 markets, 2 markets, 7 deals a month, 3 deals a week? Shouldn't we define that? Or, because like it seems too elusive, I'm expanding my business.
See, I still feel like that's a goal, right?
So if I expand it by 1%, I've expanded my business, I shut my thing down.
Well,
I'm not trying to be a D.
No, I understand what you're saying. And so the strategic objective has to relate to your goal, right? If your goal is to go from $1,000 a month in passive income to 10,
okay,
your strategic objective of increasing your business 1% is not, it doesn't compute.
So then you gotta do the math. I need to put on this many units or houses to yield this much cash flow to get to this $10,000 a month. So my strategic SWOT, whatever the F it is to acquire X amount of units in this time frame to yield.
That's right. If you identify that as an opportunity, because it may not, right? What if this is a terrible buying time right now?
Sure, absolutely.
Right? You would, right? In your mind, you think, right? If your goal, and look, we've all done this analysis. Man, all I need is X number of rentals.
Yes, that's my favorite.
Averaged over X number of dollars per month. Bam. Nailed it.
Freedom.
Well, what if we're in a bubble? We're at the peak of it. And you're the guy that goes and buys 25 properties at the top of a bubble because that was my goal.
True.
Right? So if you identify that as an opportunity, buying 25, I'm throwing this number out, buying X number of rentals at Y number of cash flow, then that's great. But if you don't analyze your opportunities and you assume what you have to do, then you could find yourself in trouble, right? The bubble could burst. You've acquired X number of properties, and now instead of Y cash flow, it's negative Z cash flow.
Sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
That's where the analysis comes in.
Good thought.
But I appreciate that question. I mean, and that is, it's important to take out your strategic objective from your goal and to extrapolate that out of the goal.
Yeah. Any questions? Anyone else? Anyone else to swap before?
Great. I know you do SWOT analysis for real estate investors. Have you done it like in other sectors like bankers, mortgage brokers, accountants, just to see whether that they can reach their potential?
Yeah, and that's why I like this process. Right. I mean, this is obviously not the only way to do what we're trying to do here, but the SWOT it's extremely versatile, right? It applies to almost everybody, and especially when it comes to business decisions. So in the banking world, lots of this.
So can I slap this down if I want another child? Should I do a SWOT analysis?
Yes, absolutely.
What's my
I mean, really, let's think about it. Your opportunities.
Most of us will give you one.
Yeah.
Opportunities.
Yeah.
Quality of life increase. Threats, you're going to be broker than you are, right?
Yeah. All right. Anyone else have any questions? What do you think about my homie?
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Savvy Radio Show. Glide online and listen to our other motivating episodes at savvyradioshow.com. Connect on Twitter at LandlordBook and always be buying assets.